Alright, today, I started doing this a couple of different ways, but today we're going to actually make I believe it's called a vermicomposter or a worm farm. And I'm going to make kind of a small one here because it's more of an experiment than anything, and we're going to use some buckets. And the way I figured, I can probably put about a half a pound of worms in there. From what I understand, they'll eat about a half a pound of compost a day, or vegetable matter a day. I'm not sure that that's true, but they say they're pretty voracious, the little red wigglers. So we're going to start off with, I saw some plans on the internet for this. We're going to start off with 4 buckets. The plan actually called for 3, but I like the idea of having 3 working trays instead of 2, and a lid. And we're going to use our drill over here with, I'm going to use a 1/4-inch bit for a bunch of the holes. And we're going to drill a bunch of holes in the bottom of some of these buckets, and the bottom bucket's actually going to be your worm tea gathering bucket. All the liquid will drip to the bottom, and we're going to put a spigot in the bottom of it. So as we do this, I'll take some more video of it. It should be an interesting project. And we're going to prop the whole thing up on a couple of cinder blocks, and that allows us to be able to move this thing and keep the bottom spigot from snapping off, because we're going to put it on the bottom of the bucket instead of through the side, because I think we'll get better drainage that way of the worm tea, which is superior fertilizer for, you mix it, like, think it's 3-to-1 with water, and it makes just phenomenal, like, house food and house plant food, and you just water your plants with it, and supposedly they'll just explode. A few reasons for doing this. We're all talking about, we're prepping for whatever, and the SHTF stuff and WROL stuff, and to be honest, just organic gardening or healthier gardening. And so I thought I'm going to do a few of these things. I think a series of videos on some healthier gardening with using different ideas with buckets and containers, because a lot of us have really crappy soil, or we're kind of in a small yard and nowhere to put it, or we're in an apartment, or. And I know there's a lot of videos out there on this, but I'm going to address it from a few other positions, because we're going to talk about some using like non-GMO or heirloom type plants, and because the genetically modified foods out there are bad for you, and they will kill you in the long run. And I have the feeling a lot of this kind of stuff has been the reason that our cancer rates have skyrocketed in the last 50-60 years, is our lifestyle and how we eat and the foods that we eat. And let's face it, vegetables and stuff that are fresh and they're ripe when you pick them taste a hell of a lot better than vegetables that you buy at a grocery store that were ripened in gas or whatever. Tomatoes are ripened with gas, and they never even taste good anymore. They certainly don't taste like when I was a kid, and sorry about the finger in the picture there, when we had our own little garden. So I've kind of put together a few things, like I've put together this is my first container that I put together. It's a little bit like a lot like an earth box actually, but I've got sweet potatoes in this one. I've got 3 sweet potatoes in there, and as these continue to grow, and you can probably see that first one right there, there's one in the middle there too. The third one that I've got in there hasn't come up yet, but as they start to get tall like this one, you start covering them up with more soil until we get up to the top. And but this will be another video on how to make one of these, and there's a whole bunch of these on YouTube already, but I'll just kind of give you my twist on them, and more like how I'm going to plant them. Okay, now we're going to start our worm composter, our bucket vermicomposter. And I went to the hardware store last night and spent, God, probably 2 hours trying to figure this thing out. Mostly because of that, trying to figure out a way to drain my worm tea out. Right? So I had to kind of come up with a way to do that where I thought I could get the best drainage out of the bottom of the bucket. And if anybody has any ideas, better ideas to get lower in the bucket, let me know, because I couldn't find anything. Right now I'm thinking about using my hot air gun and heating this a little bit and pushing down on the inside of it and getting it to sag just a little bit in one area, and that's where I'll put my my valve. That way the worm tea will drain as much as I possibly can. I don't see any way to get any closer to it than about 1/8 of an inch of a lip inside of it. So there's always going to be something in there. I just don't see any other way to do it unless it's just molded right into it. So, but for what we're doing, hopefully this will be okay. For those of you who know a lot more about worms and that sort of stuff than I do, well, you know more than I do. And if you haven't, that would probably be most of you. But anyway, what I've done is I've got my drill here with a big bit on it. I'm going to kind of have to play around with it because I need a 3/4 hole and I don't have a 3/4 bit, so I'm going to have to kind of do a 1/2 inch and go a little bigger. I would recommend getting a 3/4 bit because that's a 3/4 fitting. But if I get it close enough, then I can screw it straight through and it'll just help seal it a little bit. And you're going to need one lid, and like I said before, we're going to need four buckets. 1, 2, 3, 4. I bought these little guys. These are little air vents for the top of the bucket and probably some of the sides. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to use these yet, but I think we'll get a lot of ventilation through them. You can kind of see how they're vented like that. What I'm going to do is take a piece of that screen, right, and I'm going to cut a little piece out and put inside of this vent so that we don't have critters trying to get in or worms trying to get out. All right, keep the flies out of it from what I understand. I'm also going to use that on the bottom of the first working tray because from what I understand, sometimes the worms will actually fall through, but I think that's really if you have bad conditions. But since it'll be a new one and I don't have any idea what I'm doing, I think that might be a good idea to save that instead of letting them fall down into the bottom bucket and drown in their own worm tea. I'm also using some O-rings right here. These are they're about 3/4 inch, or the number 14 O-rings, and they will fit right over the top of that brass fitting. So I'm going to put one on the inside, one on the outside as a gasket. And there's another nut that I had to buy because I want one on the inside and one on the outside. So we're going to start now with drilling our first hole in this bucket to put our fitting in, and see how well that works. If it doesn't work, then it's all going back and I'll just order one. But for right now, this is just kind of a fun project. But like I said before, you know, in SHTF type situations, you want to be able to grow the best garden you can and as quick as you possibly can, because you're going to need food. And worm compost is supposed to be the best fertilizer out there. And you mix it in with your normal soil, you use the worm tea. I mean, it's just pretty amazing. And you can also use the worms for fishing. So, you know, that's always a good source of protein. I guess if it got bad enough, you could actually eat the worms. There's probably nothing wrong with that except they're a little slimy. From what I understand, though, I think you have to, if you're going to eat the worms, which I don't recommend, squeeze them from one end to the other and get all the poop out of them, right? Just more compost. Otherwise, I guess they taste kind of dirty. I've never tasted one, don't have any intention to try. All right.